roughly Australian $90, or half the starting monthly salary for an Afghan police officer. I'd arrived before sunrise to find a queue beginning at the entrance to the passport office and bending around several blocks of Cart 3, a residential neighbourhood in southern Kabul. Those at the front of the queue would tell me they'd been there since about 2 a.m. The only other time passports had been in such high demand since the US-led war began in 2001 was in 2015. Then, facing deteriorating safety and economic hardship after the International Security Assistance Force had handed responsibility for Afghanistan security over to the Ashraf Ghani government, hundreds of thousands made perilous bids for better lives in Europe. Of those, 180,000 Afghans made months-long journeys, enduring detention, persecution and poverty, and made it to Europe, where they applied for asylum. They were the lucky ones. Untold numbers tried and were detained and deported back to Afghanistan, shot and killed by Iranian border guards, or perished in the Mediterranean while crossing from Turkey to Greece. The difference, this time, was the kind of people leaving, or thinking about it. I asked Margot Bars, then the Deputy Country Director for the International Organisation for Migration in Afghanistan, about what their staff in the border provinces were seeing. Previously, it was mostly young men, she said, suggesting that families would stay behind in Afghanistan and wait for the earnings a brother, son or father could send back via Western Union or Hawala cash transfer networks. It was also the type of families that were thinking of leaving. While being escorted by a policeman into the passport office one morning, I heard my name called. At the door of a shop, where applicants paid to have forms and passport photos printed, was Ali Shah, an actor and film producer I'd last seen in 2019, when we were both working on When Pomegranates Howl, a film that Australia would nominate as its entry for Best International Feature Film in the 2021 Academy Awards. Ali Shah was carrying his physically disabled child, waiting to begin the next step in the convoluted process. Seeing him, one among the urban populace who had embraced and flourished with the opportunities on offer after the Taliban were toppled in 2001, it struck me how much, and how quickly, things had changed. For 20 years, a grinding conventional war had been fought by a highly skilled and equipped multinational force and an ad hoc guerrilla army with small improvised weapons almost entirely in rural Afghanistan. As a journalist, I was among a small group who tried to steer readers away from Kabul, from which, after international forces ceased all but the most covert of combat operations, the vast majority of reporting on the war was conducted. We tried to relate the experiences of Afghans in more remote areas, who not only suffered the everyday depredations of life on the front line, but saw few of the benefits promised by the international community and the government it supported in Kabul. While we never excused perfidious Taliban military tactics, such as the way they defined non-combatants in government and other sectors unrelated to security as legitimate targets, nor their authoritarian methods of control, to a small cadre of writers, this explained, to a large extent, why the group had not only been impossible to defeat, but were now on the verge of total victory. Now, however, for the first time in the war, it was the residents of Kabul and other provincial capitals for whom that war was coming. Most of them had encountered terror and violence and lost friends or family to bombings or more sophisticated attacks, but never before the constant fear of stray bullets, mortar or artillery shells, airstrikes or homemade mines that rural dwellers had experienced. And while the foreign journalists who lived in Kabul often travelled to rural areas for reporting purposes, it was mostly Afghans living in the capital, and, to lesser extents, the other provincial capitals, educated and multilingual, who we befriended and with whom we worked. The war was no longer just a series of stories to be told. It was life. The people affected weren't characters, but friends and colleagues. In the days leading up to Ed and Floor's wedding, I tried to articulate my realisation and the increasingly personal impact the changing battlefield dynamics in Afghanistan were beginning.